Hey guys, welcome back to Gatsu Gaming. Today we're talking about Demonology Warlock. This is actually the second upload of this video, and it's shot in a slightly different location because I figured, why not change it up just a little bit? Now, from what I understood, the audio did not come through well on the last recording, so let's hope this one's just a little bit better. So today, again, Demo Warlock. We've got our good buddy here, the Felguard, and he does a lot of damage for us. The Felguard is an incredibly powerful tool, but it's not the only tool that Demonology Warlocks have. I'm going to start with our spellbook here first, before we check into talents. So in our spellbook here, we still have our Command Demon ability. For CC, we have Banish. It's able to banish demons, aberrations, and elementals now. That's a very big thing because there's a lot of aberrations, and there's a ton of elementals in this expansion so far. We may see some demons, but most of the time it's aberrations and elementals. Our main attack is called Dreadstalkers. This is something that should be used every single chance we get. We should very rarely ever hold this, unless we really need the burst that comes through with specific talents. Summons 2 Dreadstalkers to attack for 12 seconds, they deal pretty heavy damage, and are a substantial portion of our overall damage every fight. We still have Create Healthstone, and of course the Soul Well, those good old lock cookies. Demon Bolt is something that has a 4-second cast time and generates 2 Soul Shards. We will very, very rarely, if ever, cast this without a proc from one of our passives, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Demonic Gateway is another piece of utility. This has actually been very useful in dungeons so far. Being able to get from point A to point B very quickly has made quite a few encounters almost laughable, especially in Temple of Sithralis, where you have to run an orb from a pedestal over to a big skull. You can actually just take the orb with you through a Demonic Gateway, which is pretty awesome. Drain Life is actually substantially buffed for Demonology, as well as I believe it also works very strongly in Destro as well. It does a moderate amount of shadow damage over 4.5 seconds with my haste level I currently have, and heals you for 500% of damage done. This is enough to keep you alive in most situations if your healer is having a rough time. Enslaved Demon is still here. Haven't used this much, that's why it's not on a bar right now. I have Kilrog. Pretty good for, you know, poking around an instance, checking around some corners, seeing which route you need to take. Unfortunately, not the most useful spell anymore. There isn't much we have to check all that often. Still have Fear. Won't use it too much in PvE. In PvP, it's amazing. Imagine that. Hand of Gul'dan is our main, well, our primary soul shard spender. This is our spammable one, so to speak. It works with 1 to 3 soul shards, and it summons an imp for each soul shard spent. It does a pretty negligible amount of damage, it's only about 4,000 or so, but it does hit every single enemy, so the more mobs that you hit with it, it'll hit every single one of those mobs for that amount. It's not split. And then of course, getting multiple imps is always better. Health Funnel, keep our demon alive. Haven't had to use it too much. When you're souling though, it's invaluable. Implosion. This is bugged right now. You can do some really goofy things with it. We won't get into it though, because it's definitely going to be fixed, but make a long story short, if you have a problem, and there's a lot of problems, throw imps at it with Implosion. It'll probably deal with your problem. Ritual of Summoning. You know, look at that. Big old lock TV to save everybody from having to walk to an instance. Obviously an invaluable asset to any raid, and actually really useful in Mythic Plus. Shadow Bolt is our main nuke. Our filler spell generates a soul shard, does a pretty mediocre amount of shadow damage. It's literally just there for filler. Shadow Fury actually has a 1-minute cooldown. I have a talent reducing the cooldown by 15 seconds right now. 35-yard range, which is a very awkward range, I might add. But stunning everything within 8 yards of where you target for 3 seconds is pretty invaluable in dungeons. This is some serious utility for every Mythic Plus group. Still have our Battle Resin Soulstone. Still have all our standard demons, including the Felguard, of course, for Demonology only. Occasionally you will actually have to use Fell Hunter. They're incredibly useful utility. They have a purge, and they have the only interrupt you have access to. So pretty solid and useful a lot of the time. If you can't use Spellguard because of some goofy switching mechanics, Imp is also still very strong. Summon Demonic Tyrant is our actual cooldown. It's the only real DPS cooldown we have outside of a couple of options in our talent tree. Whenever you summon him, he increases the current duration of every demon you have summoned by 15 seconds. So you want to make sure you have a ton of demons out and then pop him. It extends all of them by 15 seconds. He lasts for about, I believe it is 15 seconds as well. And it buffs all their damage by 15%. Now that is a huge amount of damage if you have a ton of demons out. It does not buff any demons you summon after he comes out. So you want to make sure you plan well with this cooldown. Unending Breath is actually been very useful in like 1 or 2 dungeons so far. I'm glad to see it's getting some use outside of, you know, Vashir back in Cataclysm. Unending Resolve is now a 3-minute cooldown. It may be a 3-minute cooldown baseline in Legion, but I know that the artifact weapon actually reduces it down to a minute for me in live. So not having this at a minute is definitely an awkward adjustment. It'll all work out though, because hey, we're gonna get used to it anyway. Now, Demonic Core is a passive you have whenever your imps, essentially whenever your imps expire, either whenever you, it says whenever they expend all of their energy. This also works with Implosion as well. They have a 10% chance to basically give you a stack of Demonic Core. Demonic Core reduces the cast time of Demon Bolt by 100%, essentially making it instant cast. So instead of a 4-second cast, you have an instant cast. You can do it while moving, incredibly useful. When your Dreadstalkers fade away, that, you know, 2 Soul Shard ability that I said you need to use every single chance you get on cooldown, you have a 100% chance to get a stack of Demonic Core. Now, the thing I've noticed is I always get 2 stacks with them. I don't know if that's a bug or if it's because I have 2 separate Dreadstalkers. We'll have to see if that changes at any point, or if that's just a really great thing you get. This here is a talent, so we're going to skip that for now. Our standard mastery is completely passive. It just increases the damage done by our demons. In this case, with my gear, I've got about 30%. I am stacking mastery. I am very much pushing towards mastery and haste right now, because I feel those are the best way to go at current in beta with Demonology Warlock as it stands right now. It's also the 20th of May 2018. This is build, I believe it's, you know what, I'm not even going to do the build number because I'll mess it up. Soul Leech just gets you that damage absorb shield based on the damage you do. Soul Link redirects damage to your summoned pet, and it also heals you for 25% and your pet for 50% of the absorption that it grants. It's a very, very amazing passive to have, and it makes Demo very tanky. We can eat a lot of mechanics we really shouldn't be able to. And then this here's just Soul Shards. While in combat, you regenerate up to 3 Soul Shards. It happens pretty quick. If your tanks pull a little too quickly, you can be left without shards, which gets super awkward, but at least with Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt, you get a full shard back. You don't have to worry about fragments or anything like that. So now taking a look at talents, level 15 row here, your initial stuff, we have Dreadlash. When your Dreadstalkers charge into battle, their Dreadbite attack now hits all targets within 8 yards and deals 25% more damage. This is an incredible talent. The cleave potential is great, and if you just need fairly consistent cleave for an entire fight, or even on trash, this is pretty much the go-to. This has been my favorite so far. I have not really switched from this too often. When I have, though, I have gone over to Demonic Strength. Demonic Strength is a 1-minute cooldown. It sends your Felguard into a frenzy, and he charges the target and unleashes a Fellstorm that will deal 400% increased damage. So he has his standard Fellstorm ability, which does 146% weapon damage every second for 4.4 seconds. I don't know if it's my weapon damage or his weapon damage or how that is calculated. I'm not that far into theory crafting. But take that times 400%, and that's what you get with Demonic Strength. Now, Demonic Strength and his standard Fellstorm ability do not share a cooldown. They are separate, so you can essentially send him in as you would normally. He'll do his Fellstorm, and then you can Demonic Strength, and he'll Fellstorm again. Very useful, very good burst. Now, the last thing here is a very interesting talent. I haven't used it much at all, just because it didn't feel like it hit all that hard. Bile Scourge Bombers, 2 Soul Shards, 30-second cooldown instant, but it has a 100-yard range. I'm not sure if that's a tooltip error or not, but I will say it is quite a ridiculous range on it. You can hit things across pretty much any room, so it is really useful if you're going to be very far away from a target, if you have some sort of like a, what is it, the Twin Emperors scenario back in AQ. This could be really useful for that, or if you have ads that are very far away from you all the time and you have these soul shards to spend. I'm not sure if this is going to see a whole lot of use with its current damage numbers, but we haven't hit tuning yet, so I'm still hopeful we can run this talent, because it is really cool to just see a rain of demons coming from the sky. Our level 31 gives us some interesting gameplay choices. With Demonic Calling, your Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt have a 20% chance to make your next Call Dreadstalkers cost no soul shards and be instant cast. This has been my default go-to since I've started playing on beta as Demonology. Essentially what this is because I'm going to be spamming Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt anyway, I basically just fished for the free Dreadstalkers, and most of the time I would have a proc before the cooldown came up, which is pretty incredible. It's pretty much just the standard for me. It works well, and I'm used to it at this point. Power Siphon gives you a lot more control over your procs if you know you're going to need single target burst, or if you just want to make sure you can cast on the move because of high movement in a fight. Power Siphon might be the choice for you. It's an instant cast, 30-second cooldown. You sacrifice 2 of your imps to generate 2 charges of Demonic Core. This is definitely very useful in places like Underrot on Heroic, where you're going to be moving very constantly. And it's just a bit more... It's just having a little more control over your instant casts. Of course, that does not give you the instant cast on Dreadstalkers, but you can. It's definitely quite the trade-off and probably a worthwhile choice in a lot of scenarios. This will probably be the rating talent, but Demonic Calling definitely competes with it very well. The one I've been very disappointed in actually is Doom. Doom just puts a 30-second countdown on something, and then it says 12k shadow damage after 30 seconds. It doesn't hit absurdly hard. It is a single thing, and you can have multiple Dooms out. So I could see maybe on certain cleave encounters this could be really good, but I don't see it being as useful as having the movements, the cast while move options you have with the other 2 talents, although this also does that because it is instant. We'll have to see how this plays out, and if there's anything that plays into Doom in our Azerite gear that might put Doom over the top. We'll have to see, though. Level 45 tier here, this is our defensive / movement row. We have Demon Skin, which gives you Soul Leech Absorption, passively recharges at 0.5% of max health every second, and may now absorb up to 15% of maximum health. This is basically the standard I've been using for most dungeons I've been running, because I don't need the movement speed most of the time, and I haven't had a need for Dark Pact yet. Burning Rush, of course, is our movement speed if we need it. For speed running, for any sort of speed farming, sometimes soloing, things like that, this is definitely useful while leveling for sure, because moving faster means you level faster. It does have the trade-off of you not having the defensive bonus of Demon Skin or Dark Pact, though, so buyer beware. Dark Pact is pretty much the only way to survive certain mechanics in higher difficulties right now. And by higher difficulties, I basically mean the Mythics and Beta. Certain abilities are a little overtuned, or I'm a little undergeared. Either or is possible. And you basically just need to make sure you survive. This will let you sacrifice 20% of your current health and get a shield for 250% of that sacrificed health that'll last for 20 seconds. This is usable while you're suffering from a control impairing effect, so if you're stunned, if you're stuck in some kind of a goofy mechanic, this could save you, and it is definitely very useful on anything you're progressing on if Demon Skin isn't cutting it. Our level 60 tier here is a bunch of very interesting talents. We have From the Shadows, which makes it that casting your Call Dreadstalkers causes the target to take an additional 20% additional Shadow Flame damage from you for the next 12 seconds. Now, that is just from you, not your demons. At one point, I thought that the Demonic Commander cooldown, because he does Shadow Flame damage, would deal more. Unfortunately, he does not. However, this does make your Demon Bolts hit him harder, and it makes your Implosion hit harder, because that spell is you even though you are throwing imps at it. It gives you a 12-second debuff on that target, which is also the duration of the Stalkers, so it works out pretty well. And it basically just gives you a little damage burst window. This is a very useful talent and has been my go-to for quite a bit. It does compete, however, with Soul Strike, which I very much like indeed. 50-yard range, so a ridiculous range, and has a 10-second cooldown. Your Felguard will strike into the soul of its enemy, dealing 442 shadow damage. A negligible amount of damage, costs no resource, it is on the global cooldown, of course, and it generates you a Soul Shard. Now, having an extra Soul Shard while you're moving might not seem like a whole big deal, but this can actually really set you up for some pretty incredible shenanigans on quite a few fights. It's also very good for hitting, those targets that are running away and might be out of range of everyone else. Just that little bit of chip damage might make it for you. So definitely worth considering whenever you're leveling too. Summon Vile Fiend, unfortunately, has not been doing much damage. I hope they buff him, because he's a really cool demon to have. The problem is it summons him at you, and if you're typically standing, at max range like I do, because I don't want to be in melee, he has to run the entire way to melee before he can deal any damage. So he ends up just kind of feeling like a waste of a Soul Shard on a 45-second cooldown with an almost 2-second cast. It is not good right now. It is not good right now at all. So hopefully he either does more damage or you summon him at your target or somewhere in between. I think that would probably fix it up quite a bit. The level 75 row here, we've got Dark Fury, which reduces the cooldown of Shadow Fury from that 1-minute baseline down to 45 seconds. This is pretty much the go-to for me. Having a 45-second cooldown AoE stun is pretty crazy in Mythics, especially when things hit as hard as they do right now before tuning happens. Mortal Coil is your 20% heal that also causes a target to flee for about 3 seconds. It does not break on damage, it's a Horrify effect, but it does make them run off in a random direction, so it's very difficult to use in certain situations where you may be able to aggro adds by accident and potentially wipe your group while saving yourself for a couple seconds. This is actually pretty useful in Raid if you don't need any sort of AoE stun, or if Demonic Circle wouldn't be applicable. There's been quite a few situations where just having a little bit extra healing on yourself can actually be pretty valuable. And also, just getting that heal in general can be really useful as well. Demonic Circle, of course, if you need to move quickly, if you know you need to be back somewhere, if you have to run a mechanic out, pretty useful, pretty invaluable, pretty awesome. Our level 90 row is our generation row, sort of. Inner Demons gives you a Wild Imp every 10 seconds, with a 10% chance to also summon you an additional demon for 15 seconds. Now that extra demon can range from anything from an extra Imp, to a Shavara, to Prince Malkazar himself, who does his iconic quote from Karazhan. It's pretty awesome. It is super random. So unfortunately this one is probably not the best overall, but it's interesting and it's fun, so I gotta give it points there. The one I've been using constantly is Soul Conduit. It gives you a 15% chance on every Soul Shard you spend to be refunded. This is pretty much the most consistent I've found damage-wise. I know a lot of people are very fond of Grimoire of Service, and it's definitely a very, very strong extra cooldown. But for me, with the generation issues and the haste and mastery levels I have, I felt Soul Conduit would work out better for me. I'm definitely going to play with Service more as we start to get into Mythic Plus here when they unlock that finally in beta, so I'll definitely be revisiting the specs before we go to live as well. So down here in the 100 row, we have our, quote, big damage talents, I'll call them. So Sacrifice Souls. Each Soul Shard you spend increases the damage of Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt by 5% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Now, as long as you don't have to move in a very large amount of, well, you don't have to run the entire way across the room every 10 seconds, you'll probably be able to maintain this the bulk of an encounter. And having 25% extra damage from Shadow Bolt or Demon Bolt is pretty solid, especially if things are taking extra damage with From the Shadows. This has been my go-to just because it's so simple to keep up, and unfortunately the other two talents just don't do what I want them to do with my current build. There are definitely places for both though. Now, Demonic Consumption makes your Demonic Tyrant, instead of it buffing all of your demons, it actually absorbs all of your Wild Imps and empowers himself. He will extend the duration of your other demons still, however. But it empowers him, and he gets a pretty sizable damage increase for every imp you have out. I believe with the 15 imps I had out, he hit for just a crazy, crazy big number. It was somewhere around, I think, 30% of my overall damage. Was that single cooldown from a boss fight that lasted about 2-3 minutes. Pretty incredible, considering what this cooldown is. So this will definitely be the one to watch in raids, for sure. It is, of course, unless they buff Nether Portal. 3 soul shards, 3-minute cooldown, 2.2 second cast with haste. I believe it starts at 2.5. It tears open a portal in the Twisting Nether. Gives you a 20-second window, where every time you spend soul shards, you will also command demons from the Nether to come out and fight for you. Now this has a lot of randomness to it, kind of like Inner Demons, but a little bit more here. Now you can literally get pretty much any demon you've ever seen in the game. I got a Pit Lord at one point. That was pretty crazy. Unfortunately, it's only whenever you spend soul shards, so as you're there spamming Hand of Gul'dan, hoping for refunds from Soul Conduit maybe, something like that, you know, you're only going to get so many demons out of it. I could only imagine that you want to go and get as many of the demons out as you can, and then near the end of it, pop your Demonic Commander, and watch as all those demons get extended. However, I wasn't able to get too many demons out with the haste level we're at, so this kind of felt pretty lackluster. Of course, it's also pretty hard to tell how much damage those demons are doing, because they show up as various random attacks, which I'll show here. I'll just hit Shift and pull this up. There's a whole bunch of little demons in there. Just from Wild Imp, Tyrant, Dreadstalkers, all of them there. So it takes a little bit of math that I don't have the expertise to go through. So that's pretty much it for Demonology Warlock. Like I said, I am pretty decently geared on Warlock at this point here. I'm sitting at 330 item level. This is a little over heroic item level. I have a few mythic pieces. Our Azurite gear does not have any secondaries on it, of course. We just have those special traits. My helmet has 3 of them. Unfortunately, I can't get any more than the one that I have in it right now. My shoulders don't have any traits in them at all. And my chest piece, which should be Azurite, is unfortunately not yet. They haven't updated the model or the item itself yet. But at this point, I'm sitting with around 10% crit, 13% haste, with a pretty sizable amount of my gear having haste on it. It's actually, I have more haste than I do mastery rating-wise, which is kind of entertaining. My mastery, of course, sits up super high, and it scales very well. To put it into perspective here, I have a trinket that grants me 1158 mastery. Remember, I'm at 31%. So when I pop this trinket, it goes up to 60% mastery. That's a 30% buff from that single item, which is pretty ridiculous when you think about it. So it looks like mastery may be the way to go right now. Haste definitely is always going to be good, and I don't think I really need to worry about crit, because I haven't had any issues critting whatsoever. There's definitely some baked-in crit to a couple of our spells as well, that I don't think we can see at this point. But that'll be it for this video, guys. I'll be back at some point this week with an Affliction video. Just going over the basics of Affliction. It's not too much changed. What they did just bring Drained Soul back, so stay tuned for that. And we'll see you in the next video.